From a planting standpoint, we obviously had more corn acres than what the trade was looking for. The average guess was 94.4 million, I believe, and we came out with 95.3 million acres. So 900,000 more acres of corn to be planted in the U.S. than what was expected. And really, from the states that I would consider add up to some decent bushels, Ohio and Pennsylvania were about the only two states that saw a reduction in corn acres. We have decent increases expected in the South. Arkansas and Mississippi up 400,000 combined. Texas up 300,000. Those states could actually, obviously will harvest sooner, and it can feed a pipeline earlier, potentially, with what we've got going on. As we look at elsewhere, the biggest things that I think that I noticed, and I know we're combining a lot of states, but Iowa, Minnesota, both Dakotas, and Nebraska, we're looking at 2.2 million more acres of corn versus a year ago. Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, we're looking at another over 1 million acres in those states. So you can see it adds up. 4.7 million more acres of corn total is a big number, and we're going to have more of a crop issue probably for our ending stocks figure not to increase. I would expect if we have an average crop or a trend line crop that our carryout number is probably going to be closer to 2.2 billion if our demand stays relatively the same. It's going to take more of a yield loss to bring our carryout back down to levels that we are today. But obviously Mother Nature is in charge, and we'll see what kind of yield we get from that. But those are the biggest takeaways on corn. If we look at soybeans, the map is pretty much just the opposite. We grew 87 million acres of beans last year. Now we're looking at 83.5 million, so down 3.5 million. Everybody was losing acres except, I guess on a grander scale, you could call Texas, you could put Texas into that, but Ohio and North Carolina, about the only other states there that we're looking at. Everybody else planting less beans, profitability of corn, crop insurance price being higher, all contribute to that. But those acreage numbers, with demand, if we don't lose a bunch of demand going forward, it only really takes about a yield of 1 bushel less than what they used in the Ag Outlook form, which was a half a bushel higher than our record, 52.5 million or bushels an acre. It's what they were using. You just cut it by 1 and take it down to 51.5, and our carryout probably drops into the low 200 million category, which from a U.S. standpoint is starting to get tight again. So we don't have a lot of room for error in yield, in my opinion, on soybeans. We probably have a little bit more room for error in corn because we did plant more acres. Then I got the wheat chart, or the wheat map, and that was a surprise as well. We actually had less wheat planted than what the trade was looking for. Didn't seem to matter with prices so far since that report came out, but probably the biggest thing, Kansas being down and Oklahoma being down as much as they were. Spring wheat acres are going to be down, and what I was reading was that spring wheat acres in the north could be the lowest number that we've seen since 1970, which would be a 55-year number. That's quite impressive. I hadn't realized that. And then the other things that stuck out was if you look at Michigan and Ohio, you're looking at 190,000 more acres of wheat being planted over there. So if that crop's pretty decent, Chicago wheat probably has, could potentially have more pressure just because the extra acres out east, if that crop is good. There really wasn't a ton of surprises, but there were some nuances that I think just kind of confirmed what we had suspected. And the corn stocks number came in at 8.15 billion, which is pretty much right on the trade guess, which I don't think I've ever seen. that was quite impressive for that to happen. But our corn stocks number is down about 200 million bushel versus a year ago. What stood out to me, there's a couple different things that stood out. Probably where is the corn and what that means for stuff. The Western Corn Belt has 255 million more bushels of corn as of March 1st than they had a year ago, while the Eastern Corn Belt has 361 million less corn bushels than they had a year ago. A lot of people probably already knew that to a degree that are in the industry, because the crop out west this last year was bigger, and it was bigger than 2 years ago because there was a pretty big drought 2 years ago. In the last couple of years we've seen that expand, but that's why we see basis implications that we see is the corn is out west, and if you look at basis out west, it's been dragging pretty much all winter, but we've seen a really decent surge in corn basis in the Eastern Corn Belt because we've had less. Indiana's crop was smaller than expected. Ohio's crop was smaller than expected. So, and this report just shows that we have less corn out there, so basis out east has improved a decent amount. And what I have noticed also, for example, is there is a Central Illinois elevator that I was talking with somebody from, and they have corn trains going out April, May, and June, and about half of those are going to the southeast this year, where most of their corn the last couple of years have been going down into Texas and even Mexico. Now this year they can rail it east, hit a switch over in Indiana and go on a different rail line and hit the chicken farms down in the southeast U.S. So it kind of tells you that the basis must be pretty decent if we can transport corn from Illinois all the way down to the southeast. They're obviously not able to get as much corn from other sources that they were before. The next biggest thing, which we already kind of knew, or a lot of people already knew, but where is that corn, not just regionally, but is it on the farm, off the farm? And we actually have 373 million more bushel in the elevator system this year than we had a year ago, but we have 579 million less on the farm. So the farmer has done a way better job this year at selling grain than they did a year ago. There's not as much sitting out here on the farm, and just because it's in the elevator doesn't mean the elevators own it all. The farmer could still own it, but obviously if it's off the farm, there's that many less bushels out here that the farmer owns, which is actually a good thing. We saw the market rally in December, post-harvest. Farmers were making sales. January and February we saw a good rally that the farmer obviously took advantage of, and I'm glad that they did. But the way it's set up now, the elevator has it. We saw basis back away when everybody was moving corn, both the elevator and the farmer. But now we're starting to see some areas where basis has picked back up because the farmer isn't moving it. The farmer's already moved a lot of it. And that's a good thing, especially in light of tariff news that we're getting this week, and the unknown of demand going forward. At least the farmer isn't sitting on a whole bunch of the 24 crop and still has a lot of the 25 to market. It feels like they don't have hardly any 24 left, and chances are they might have already made a few sales for 25. So the farmer is in a better shape from that standpoint. Might not be in a better spot as far as making money because obviously prices are lower and costs are up. I get that. But regionality of corn and where it's at, it's not on the farm, which will have some basis implications as well as we go forward. And then just regionally for Illinois itself, 180 million less corn on the farm than a year ago and 77 million more in the elevator. You still have 100 million less basically of bushels versus March 1 last year in the state of Illinois. And if we're shipping some out to the east on rail and the river basis has been decent, I know we're still shipping via the river. Some of these processors, hopefully, we'll have to be seeking some coverage in the spring and summer potentially here that could shake things up, but there's just not as much corn laying around. And with the current spread environment on the board, July corn has about a 25-cent higher price than September futures. So it's telling us if they're not going to pay you to hang on to it past July, it's really telling me that every elevator should be trying to get empty by the end of July. And so then it's a matter of how much extra corn do we have? Do we have a good crop or a bad crop, as to what that can mean for potential fall basis levels for farmers as well. But that is something that I found interesting on the corn side. For soybeans, really not a lot of change there either versus the average guess. 1.91 billion bushel of beans as of March 1. The average guess was 1.90, so it's relatively close. Again, not much of a surprise, probably more of who has the beans and who doesn't. But we were 155 million bushel more soybeans as of March 1 than last year from a national perspective. We have 122 million more in the elevator system, 56 million less on the farm, which again, the farmer has done a good job of moving beans. We had basis improvements. We saw some board rally, and farmers, heeded the advice that a lot of people were putting out there this fall in the fact that storage has a cost to it and interest has a cost to you. And if there wasn't much incentive to hang on to soybeans, we should be moving them. And I think the farmer has done a really good job of doing that. Regionally, the Eastern Corn Belt only has 3 million more bushel of beans than last year, so relatively the same number. The Western Corn Belt has 39 million more beans than a year ago, so that's where the beans are at. And I think from a state standpoint, I mentioned nationally we're about 55 million more beans on hand as of March 1st. Illinois only has 4 million more than last year, but Iowa has 47 million more bushel of beans sitting around as of March 1 than they had a year ago, and the nation is 55. I mean, that's kind of telling us Iowa's sitting on a lot of beans and what that might mean for basis for them going forward, especially as we lose our export program because China usually buys beans October through February from us, and we ship a lot through the winter, and then they really fall off as Brazilian beans hit the market. The processors are the ones that take over. It just looks like there's going to be a lot of beans for them to get their hands on.